Well, we have a bit of an unusual Fly Midwest podcast episode for you this go around. Some news broke this evening that we want to share with everyone, as well as pay honor to the man. AOPA's Air Safety Institute Director Richard McSpadden passed in an aircraft accident this afternoon in Lake Placid, New York. So he is a former guest of the podcast, former commander of the Air Force Thunderbirds, and all-around great guy. He's been a huge part of the aviation community with AOPA, and definitely a big loss for the community.
According to the AOPA, Mr. McSpadden was in an aircraft accident. He was flying a Cessna 177 Cardinal. They unfortunately had an emergency on takeoff. They tried to make the runway, and they could not. So, unfortunately, both people passed, Mr. McSpadden and whomever was with him. That has not yet been released. Yeah, it happened this evening, so it's, as of right now, the news is only a couple hours old, so we don't know a whole lot. Just what has been released from AOPA and their representatives.
And the nature of the emergency itself isn't immediately known either. So that in the coming days, I'm sure will be information that comes out. The sad part of this is typically Richard will be one of the guys to offer early analysis on all kinds of aircraft incidents. And he's made a huge mark with the Air Safety Institute and all the work that he's been doing with them. Like I said, it's a pretty big blow to the aviation community. He is survived by his wife, Judy, his son, Grant, and daughter, Annabelle, as well as all the great people at AOPA who are probably like a second family as well. So,
yeah. I mean, he touched our lives despite us not knowing him as extremely well. We were fortunate to have him on the podcast not too long ago. We were able to meet him in person at Oshkosh, and he's an excellent person through and through. We got to talk with him a little bit. He was really, really busy, but he made the time for us, which was really cool. In the grand scheme of things, we're not that important. And we're not a big podcast. We're not a big name, but he took time out of his day to say hi and actually chat with us. So, him and his work are invaluable. And it's really sad to hear that he's gone.
Yes, it is. And from that episode, I think we had talked about that as the commander of the Thunderbirds, he was at Nellis at the same time that I was stationed at Nellis. And I got to watch him fly regularly as the commander of the Thunderbirds, and received a coin from him for some acts that I did as a security forces member at Nellis. And then to have that full circle moment of interviewing him on the podcast was really cool and a unique opportunity for me. But he was just genuinely a nice, humble person to interact with. So not just in the interview, but when we reconnected at Oshkosh this year, he was just super nice, super genuine, and willing to help us out at Oshkosh as well. I mean, he set up our interview with Penny Levin.
He seems like the kind of person who would, do anything for anybody he thinks is doing a good thing, which is a really cool character trait. And yeah, we're going to miss him. His early analysis videos were kind of the best.
He by far was the best out there with the early analysis stuff. He was very well done the way he put things together. He had a really engaging podcast. The whole range of content that he put out there in hopes of making aviation safer for everybody was really inspiring. And the project that they were working on with the NASA reports to try to put that to some proactive use as opposed to it just being data that gets reported and just lives out there. And him talking about wanting to come back on and talk to us once they got that all sorted out. So I'm hopeful that AOPA will continue to carry on that legacy, and it's something that we can talk to them about in the future. I remember at AirVenture when I was talking to him, after Penny was done speaking, and I was talking about how great I thought her presentation was, and it'd be great if we could get her on the podcast. And he looks at me and goes, "You want to meet her? She's right over there. Let's go." And then he brings me over, he introduces us, and just super helpful. And again, like you said, Manny, it's not like we think of ourselves as some big name in the podcast space, but for, him to go out of his way and help us out and make those introductions was really cool.
Yeah. Like, he's no small fish, As the president of the Air Safety Institute, that's a big deal. Like, people knew his name. Like, as he's kind of like, as far as aviation goes, a household name. Like, people know who he was. It's not like he wasn't unimportant or nobody knew who he was. Like, and he took time out of his day to kind of introduce us to people. Like, there's not a lot of people who just do that. That really showed a lot.
I know that if you're in the aviation game long enough, you have the potential to lose people close to you or people that you're acquainted with or have interacted with in some fashion. But this certainly is a big one because of just the widespread impact I think he's had on aviation as a whole, military aviation, general aviation. He did a lot and touched a lot of people. So I think that there's a lot of people out there in the aviation community that are going to be feeling this one for a while. So
yeah, I told my sister that she, isn't in the aviation community. I told her, yeah, it's grim, but you be in aviation long enough and you'll know somebody who passes, whether they're flying or not. Usually they are. And it's unfortunate, but it's our reality. What we do is kind of dangerous. You know that by the Air Safety Institute videos, those early analysis videos. People crash, people die. It's unfortunate. It's really, really unfortunate. And that's why what he did was so important, is to bring more awareness to those things, to make the aviation community safer. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and to honor the memory of Richard McSpadden, we are going to replay our interview with him from a few months ago. A lot of great content there. You get to hear about kind of what he's about, the things he's done with the Thunderbirds and the Air Safety Institute. And yeah, just take a moment to remember the legend of aviation that is Richard McSpadden.
Boy, do we have an exciting episode coming up for all of you. This is one that we've been hyping up a bit for a while and was super fun for us to record. We got a chance to sit down with the one and only Richard McSpadden. Richard McSpadden is of the Thunderbirds fame. He was the commander of the United States Air Force Thunderbirds and had a prestigious career flying F-15s with the United States Air Force. Upon his retirement, he went into private business and ultimately wound up with the Air Safety Institute with AOPA, where today he hosts their podcasts as well as produces a number of videos and content for the Air Safety Institute. So we are super excited to welcome Mr. Richard McSpadden to the Flying Midwest podcast.
Jim, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad we finally got this together.
It's been a long time coming, and we're really excited to have you here. So
nice to meet Maddie.
She is lovely.
Aww. It is lovely to be here with the both of you.
So I'm going to get this anecdote out of the way. I'm in super nerd mode right now because when I was stationed at Nellis, I watched you fly as your time as the commander of the Thunderbirds. And to be able to come full circle and have a conversation with you now is just really great to me.
That's awesome. What were you doing in Las Vegas at that time frame?
I was stationed with the 99th Security Forces Squadron.
Okay.
So
yep.
I was stationed at Nellis for 4 years, and then at the completion of my enlistment, I came back to Minnesota and got into law enforcement here. So.
Oh, well, thank you for your service as a first responder. You guys do this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I actually have a coin from you that sits on my display at my desk that kind of is a centerpiece of my display. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, which coin is it? Because we had a few. Is it the diamond, the delta? Is it the...
I want to say it was the diamond. Now I don't have it in front of me, so I can't just look at it. But
yeah.
I was directing traffic for something, and I must have caught your attention. So I got a coin from you that sits on my desk.
Ah, awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. Good. It's fun to go full. Every now and then this happens, like I'll meet somebody that we did an enlistment ceremony for them because we used to do those before every show. And every now and then I'll run into somebody that says, hey, you enlisted me at, so-and re-enlisted me usually at so-and-so air show or whatever. Those are always fun connections.
So I'm going to jump into our Fast 5 questions if you're ready to go.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. Of all the aircraft that you've flown, what is your favorite?
The F-15, because it was such a dominant combat performer. There was nothing in the skies that really could match the F-15. It was durable. It took me all over the world flying in that thing and took great care of me. And its combat record is something like 105-0. It's never been defeated in combat. It completely redefined what it meant to establish air supremacy.
That's a great answer.
Oh, yeah.
All right. The next question we have for you. What was your favorite air show venue when you formed with the Thunderbirds?
Oh, man. It would have to be one of the ones over the water. The Chicago air show, the Chicago Air and Sea Show is always a lot of fun. Fort Lauderdale was always a lot of fun. The one that was the most emotional was Cheyenne, Wyoming, because in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that's the only show the Thunderbirds have done continuously every year in their existence since they started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's going to have a special spot for you then.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's a small show, relatively speaking, but it's so much fun, and the people are great, and a lot of history there for us. So, yeah. Now, the hard part of that is you exclude a bunch of air shows that I loved and the people I loved, but it's hard to top Chicago and Fort Lauderdale.
Chicago's one I want to get to. Watching an air show over the water is kind of on my list of things I'd like to do. So,
yeah. Do we have time for a funny story?
absolutely.
Okay, over the Chicago Air and Show, one time we were doing our practice show, which is on a Friday. And the way that show is laid out, you go up and down the water, and then you come off the water and reposition on your run to the north. And when you reposition, you go out over there. And so we're doing this show, and every time the solos come in from the north, they're late. You know, they would call like late 10 or late 5 or something. And finally, I'm like, guys, what's going on over there to the north? They said, oh, the Cubs are playing a game, and we're running overhead Chicago Stadium there, Wrigley Field. So they're diverting just a little bit from their typical run-in so they can go over the field. That night, we go out to eat and we see a bunch of Major League umpires sitting at a table. And we're in all our Thunderbird gear, and they come over and they go, hey, were you the guys who were coming to Wrigley? Yeah, that was us. They're like, oh, that was so awesome. We stopped play. The crowd was loving it. And so things like that never make the light of day, that just made that job so much fun.
That is delightful.
Awesome. I wouldn't mind watching the Thunderbirds in the middle of a baseball game. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I'm sitting there, I love baseball, so watching the Cubs, having a beer, and a few jets flying overhead, yeah, that's pretty good. So, of course, they told me that. Then the next time I repositioned out to the north, I brought the diamond overhead Wrigley Field, so we just made it with our repositioning. Yeah, it was a ton of fun.
That's great. All right, next question for you. Favorite aviation movie?
Oh, favorite aviation movie? That's a good one. I don't know. I have to tell you, I really liked the Top Gun movies, both of them. I mean, there's some better, there's 12 O'Clock High and a couple others that, go way back into history. But, I really enjoyed the Top Gun movies. It's kind of my era of fighters flying in that generation, so people always ask, is it very real? No, but that's not the point. Just the movie. Yeah.
It doesn't need to be real. It just needs to be entertaining, right?
Yeah, and that whole thing about
close to real.
They had to dive down into the crater and pull out, and this tins you pull out and all, and they're like, "Is that the way you do it?" No, not in a million years. You would never do it. But it was fun, and I enjoyed.
It's still fun to watch.
Tom Cruise is quite the pilot in real life. He owns a P-51.
Yeah,
he's got some chops. Yeah,
that's his plane in the movie, isn't it? The P-51.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
I read that somewhere. I didn't realize it at first, but I'm like, yeah, you're right. He's got quite the chops himself.
So somebody was telling me a story that when he went down and bought that airplane, he bought it somewhere in Florida or something. He was flying it back to California, and he stopped in an FBO somewhere. I can't remember, but he pulls up in his Mustang and he stops, and there's some guys sitting in the FBO, just fueling up, waiting to go out. And this guy starts walking in towards him, and one of the guys is going, that kind of looks like Tom Cruise. And this is before anybody knew he had a P-51. And sure enough, it's Cruise, and they said he just walks in the FBO, and he's like, hey, what's going on, guys? Anybody check the weather out west? He just starts talking like a pilot talks, Anybody check the weather? And they're all just going.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I could not imagine just sitting in the FBO and Tom Cruise walks in and, hey, how's it going, guys?
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Wow. What a story.
Is this a new movie? Like.
Yeah. So 2 questions left. Favorite airshow memory?
Oh my gosh, there were so many good airshow memories. The Chicago one for sure was a great airshow. We had a great airshow in Alaska at Anchorage. Elmendorf there? But we were trying to. The years I was there, we really wanted to fly a really crisp airshow, very fast paced. So the deconfliction between the solos coming across and the diamond and interacting that show was actually one of the more challenging things to do. And the fastest, we were trying to do a 30-minute show. From the time we took off to the time we landed, 30 minutes. We could do about 32. And I think the fastest we ever got, nice cool air at Anchorage, is we got down to 31 minutes at one time, I think. So that one really sticks out to me as a really fun air show.
Very cool. All right, our last question, and my personal favorite. If you could meet anyone in aviation, dead or alive, and have a conversation with them, who would it be?
Man, I have met so many people in aviation. I got to meet Chuck David once. I got to meet Bob Hoover a couple of different times. I think I'd like to meet Robin Olds, honestly. Yeah. After reading his book, Fighter Pilot, and sort of growing up in the era that was immediately after him, he was such a figure, an iconic figure that I would enjoy a conversation with him. And there's a guy named Richard Drury that wrote a book called My Secret War. It was about flying an A-1 Sky Raider. And it was really influential in me deciding to become a pilot. I read that book when I was in college. And I'd like to meet him. And then Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, A Gift of Wings. I read every book he wrote. I would love to meet him sometime.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for playing along with our Fast 5 questions.
Yeah, I don't think I met your fast criteria, but, hey, I'm a super guy, so I don't do anything fast anymore.
We'll take slow and steady. That also works.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. So tell us a little bit about your aviation background.
My mom gave my dad a gift that was a flight lesson. When he was in his early 40s, I was in high school, college at the time, and my dad was a really hardworking, nose to the grindstone kind of guy. And I had never in my life seen anything so captivate him and seen him express so much joy in anything. And I thought, wow, if that can excite my dad so much, that looks like a lot of fun. So I started it. And then, I did back in that day, we did a lot more of that than I see these days, where we would trade our cheap labor for flight hours. So we would sweep hangars or wash airplanes or gas them up or whatever. And in return, they would give you flight hours, local FBOs. And so I did that for quite a while. And then somewhere in there, my dad is the one that said, hey, you know what? I bet you would really enjoy flying for the Air Force. And so I set that goal, and, it worked out beyond my wildest dreams, really. But I flew GA throughout my time in the Air Force. My brother and my dad always had GA airplanes, usually multiple. And I would go home. And my brother now is a captain for UPS and flies a 747-8. And I would go home and just get rebooted in GA and fly with them a lot, get my tailwheel endorsement and all those things. So I kept my hand in GA all throughout my military career.
All right. So the next question, we talked a bit about getting the Air Force and aviation. How do you get to a point where you're working through a selection process and become the commander of the Thunderbirds?
Oh, yeah. It's a pretty long process, as you might imagine. I want to say from the time I applied until the time I was selected was about a year.
Okay.
And it's really pretty typical of the Air Force. The way the team operates is they have 12 officers on the team and 6 pilots, and half of those rotate out each year for continuity of the squadron and for continuity of the flight demonstration. You'll rotate out 3 of the pilots and rotate, every year. And so every other year, they're looking to hire a new commander and flight leader. So you run the organization as a squadron commander, and then you also lead the flight demonstration, which makes it just a fabulous job, because either one of those by themselves is a fantastic job. Now you combine them.
Sure.
It's a dream job. And so the message came out about, we're looking for a new commander, and if you meet these qualifications, submit an application package. And it was extensive. I bet it took me a month to put together the package. And wow. I really didn't think I had a shot at it. And in fact, I really even wasn't going to apply. But then I decided, come on, you might as well try, right? Like, when did you reach that point in life where you weren't even willing to try for something that you would really enjoy doing? So I applied, had a great boss at the time, and he said, hey, just be realistic about this, Richard, because I don't really know anybody, and you don't know anybody, and these things are very political. This is a pretty high visibility
Sure.
position. They're usually related to a senator, a chief of staff, or, they've got a sponsor in the Air Force or something. I said, yeah, I get it. That's fine. Well, it just worked out that in this particular year, they were really looking for somebody that had a lot of fighter time, a lot of time leading in fighters. And I was the only F-15 pilot that had made the down select. So initially, they brought something like 12 of us out or something like that on a visit. And then from there, they culled it down. So you go on a weekend visit with a team. They take all the applications and they take the top 10, 12, whatever. And then you go out and visit with the team and do some interviews with the team and the local and the current commander. And then based on that, they whinny it down again and they take the 4 or 5 and they invite them out to Nellis. And then you do basically more interviews and a fly off. And I thought, well, I don't think this is very competitive because I've never flown the F-16. And so I mentioned that to one of the guys. I'm like, oh, I've never flown the F-16. And the guy goes, trust me, that won't be your issue. You'll this whole side stick thing, you're going to get that down in about 5 minutes. And he was right. They sit you in the airplane and you kind of get the side stick and you're a little bit wobbly for just a few minutes, but very quickly you're like, oh, I got it. It's very intuitive. And he was exactly right. It was just like a non-issue. Huh. And then from there, I think they made one more cut down to maybe 2 or 3. I don't remember. Another round of interviews with, all the way up to, at that time, the 4-star running Air Combat Command. And then eventually but in true Air Force form, by the time they had sort of narrowed it down to where there were like 4 or 5 of us, we didn't know each other before, but we got to become really good friends. And so it sort of all made a pact like, hey, we all know how the Air Force's bureaucracy and how this thing's going to work. But here's the deal. Whoever one of us that gets selected, you got to call the rest of us first. So we get the deal before, we get the whole formal notification, right? Well, so the guys called me up and they said, hey, we all got notified to go to Langley. And I'm like, well, I didn't get the notification. They're like, oh, sorry, dude, you probably didn't make the cut. Yeah, I probably didn't. Thanks, guys. Love meeting you. Best of luck to whoever gets selected. Well, then I get a call on like a Saturday morning, and it's the general. He's a 4-star General Jumper. It's his exec, and she says, "Hey, Spad." Here's my call sign. She goes, "I'm so sorry, we forgot to call you, but you're supposed to be here Monday morning for an interview with General Jumper. Is your schedule free on Monday morning?" Darn right, my schedule's free. So I went to interview with General Jumper, and so the way the notification came down was my boss was a great guy at the time. He sets up a little prank, and so he calls me into his office, and I had been working this operational unit that had been struggling before I came over, and so anyway, we were working through some issues, and he brings me into his office, and in the office is him and the 06 and the general in charge of the base. And they have very somber looks on their face. And my boss starts out by saying, hey, Spad, it's become apparent to us that we're going to need a new operations officer for the first squadron, which is that was my job, the guy that runs operations, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this is how it happens. This is how you get fired. And so I'm thinking, why are you going to fire me? And so I'm just kind of a little stunned. And finally, I think it's the general that speaks up and he goes, yeah, we're going to need a new operations officer because you've been selected as Thunderbird 1. And so it took me a little bit because I'm thinking I'm going to get fired and my career's over, right? Not to go lead the Thunderbirds. So I had a little shift in perspective there. That was kind of a funny prank that they played on me, and it was pretty good.
So that assignment is 2 years, you said, right?
Yeah, it's 2 years. It's always 2 years unless there's something unusual. Every now and then a pilot is moved off the team for a bunch of different reasons. Most of the time it's medical or family related or something like that. And every now and then they'll ask a pilot to extend a third year. In fact, my first year on the team, we had a slot pilot that we were extending a third year. But that is really a heavy ask of someone because on that team, you're traveling all over the place. You're gone a lot. And even when you're home, it's an intense operation. So it's a big ask of the family. And a third year is not something we took lightly.
Sure.
You mentioned that, air show life is very demanding. Asking a third year out of a pilot is a lot. Could you elaborate a little bit on how the circuit was like for you, like air show life? How was that?
Yeah, the typical week was, when you got selected for the team, you had to go, if you didn't have any F-16 time or you were new to it, you had to go through about a 6-week, 2-month transition course, which was pretty intense because they had to get you to Nellis, which is where outside of Las Vegas, where the team is based, by 1st of November. And then you go into training season, and training season is intense. You're flying 3 times a day, 5 days a week at least, sometimes 6 days a week. And you're learning this whole new thing. You're experienced, pilot, but you've never done anything like this before. And so the training season is really intense. When you come out of training season, you go on the road, it's actually a little bit of a relief because the cadence slows down a little bit. But you leave on Thursday and you arrive over a show site and do some maneuvers and check out your maps and do visual references. On Friday, you would get up and go to some kind of a public relations event, a high school or elementary school or, some kind of elderly home or something. And then Friday afternoon, you would fly your practice show. Friday night would be a party or social. Saturday morning was, as the commander, that time was really valuable to me because it was time that usually there was nothing going on and I would do things like the budget for the squadron or HR issues or, what all the stuff it took to run the squadron as a squadron commander. I always did that on Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon was the air show. Saturday night, air show party. Sunday, air show. Sunday night, usually either fly home or Sunday night would be off. And then Monday, you'd fly home. Tuesday, you'd fly a practice show. Wednesday was your day off. And then Thursday, you'd do it all over again. We never went more than 2 days without flying the profile. And if we did, we would spread it out and widen up a little bit.
Well, that's interesting. The widening it out part. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, there's different formations you can fly in different proximities. So it's your very tightest, which is the close formation. You're flying in some formations, some maneuvers, maybe 18 inches apart or something like that. But those are, in the maneuvers that are very predictable. And then if the weather gets rough or if somebody's having a bad day or if I'm having a bad day, anybody in the formation can call loosen it up. And to loosen it up, we'd spread it out by about a foot, maybe move to that 2.5, 3 feet spacing, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is a lot. It actually gives you a lot more breathing room on the wing.
Sure.
And so we would, we did not hesitate to move it out, to loosen it up if we needed to for any number of reasons. And most of the time, unless you had a really discerning eye, the people on the ground can't tell it.
That's cool. I was wondering how that worked because I've always seen videos of the really tight formations, and I'm like, what happens if you get a little turbulence or you screw up a little bit? What happens?
Yeah.
You guys have it's been a while since I've heard anything negative about a safety issue or anything. So I assume you had something in that regard, but it's cool that you guys have that plan.
Yeah, and you've got some built-in buffer there, even as tight as that formation is. And what you learn very quickly in the leadership role is your job is, all the people that fly the wing, they never look forward. They look exclusively off either your aircraft or the aircraft next to you. And so you learn very quickly that you have a ladder of priorities. The first is you got to do whatever it takes to keep the formation safe. And then you've got to be predictable. And then you've got to be smooth. And then you work on your precision in that order. Now, eventually, you got to get to the precision or else you have no business leading Thunderbirds around. But you can never forget that that's the order. And if you're predictable, if the wingman can predict what's happening next and where you're going, it's amazing the kind of things that they can keep a tight formation through. They really are just incredible in their ability to do that and their skills of concentration.
Well, I'm sure that we have, and probably our listeners have too, have heard some of the comms that the Thunderbirds do and just the cadence of it all. I have to imagine communication is a huge part of what you do as well.
Yep, you're right. Most people probably heard that. The lead is constantly talking to the pilots on the wing, and that's just, again, that whole predictability piece of it. So letting them know before you increase power or start a turn or stop a turn or whatever, and you fly that formation and that profile so many times, they can anticipate it anyway. And they can anticipate by the tone of your voice, the cadence of your voice, whether or not you're having a good day at all. Yeah, it's amazing the things they could pick up on.
Yeah, I'd imagine flying that closely together and being not just physically, but just as a group, being a close-knit group. Yeah, you probably could pick up on just the tone of voice that Maybe the boss is a little off today.
Yeah.
Is there anything you found particularly challenging with that assignment?
Yeah, the challenge is the cadence, the pace of operations that you're flying, to make sure that you stay rested and the team stays rested in spite of that pace is challenging. The profile itself to fly and to fly it precisely where, we really took it. It was important to us that we were representing the power, pride, and precision of the U.S. Air Force. And so everything we did, we thought was a reflection of that. And the teams I was on the 2 years, we took that really seriously. And so to fly those maneuvers with the kind of precision that our colleagues were using to drop, laser-guided bombs or to go in at this time over in either Afghanistan or Iraq or Iran or somewhere.
Yeah.
We felt like we had to reflect the kind of stuff that they were doing to achieve that mission and the stuff that we were doing. And that was hard, really hard. We graded ourselves, on a scale of 1 to 10. Then we aggregate the grades and we'd come up with an air show grade that was typically around a 7 to an 8, somewhere in there. Sometimes as low as a 6.
Yeah, that self-critique's got to be important, though. I'll tell you. Improve
Really.
And keep doing them better.
Really important. It was really important for safety, because
Sure.
we spent so much time focusing on the details and stuff. That was a real element of our safety.
No room for complacency when you're 8 inches apart from each other, right? Are there any other stories that you would like to share?
There were some fun stories, like we were in Florida and our number 3 guy, this world-class guy, this fabulous human being, his name was Chris Callahan, but we called him Clyde. And his wife was pregnant. They had got married right as he joined the team. And his wife was pregnant, so we were like on standby. We wanted Chris to be able to get home for the birth. And so we had just launched, and we got the word passed through center, actually, that said, coming over, imagine this, you're flying along, and we would travel to and from, in our different formations. And we get the word through center, and they say, hey, Thunderbird 1, I don't remember the center, Houston Center. We just got word that Thunderbird 3's wife has gone into labor. Right, that came over the frequency. So we're like, all right, let's push it up. So we push the throttles up to the max cruise speed we could get without breaking the sound barrier. We're calling ahead to get the tankers in to come in earlier because we're using more fuel now. We need more food. So this whole thing was like just a real ordeal for us to get there as fast as we could, and get the fuel set up and get everything set up. We called ahead and had cars there waiting on them to take them into the hospital. So we land. And we usually have this elaborate, we fly over to let the Nellis know we're home, and there's people out watching, usually the arrival, and we do a little walk down and shake hands and all that. Like, no, cancel all the arrival stuff. So we come in and we land and get Clyde taxied up there, out of formation. As I remember, on his own, he taxis up, he shuts down, the car's waiting for him. They zoom him over to the hospital. He's there in his Thunderbird show suit still, and made it in time for the delivery of his first child. So that
awesome.
kind of stuff is just priceless. Those memories are really, really fond for us.
That's so sweet.
That's so awesome.
I love our different reactions. So moving forward a little bit after the Thunderbirds, so how did you get involved with the AOPA?
So after I left the Air Force, I went to work for a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems. Really, that was started by Ross Perot. And Ross Perot and EDS was bought by Hewlett Packard. So when I left the Air Force, I worked for EDS and Hewlett Packard for 12 or 13 years. And I would fly GA, in and around that time period. Somewhere in there, I really began missing aviation. And so I started reaching out, looking for opportunities that there might be available. And my first thought was I really wanted to come to work for AOPA because, in aviation, in general aviation, AOPA is really such a well-respected organization and what it's done to protect flying. I mean, I was very well aware of that, joined, many, many years ago. And so I really wanted to be part of AOPA because I knew it's work I would enjoy. And so I started calling over, and it took a while. It just took a while, and I think eventually I like to joke with Mark Baker, our president. I think I just wore him down. I think at some point he said, "Oh my God, just give the guy a job, get him off my back." So it worked out. yeah, the safety job came open. AOPA thought that was a good fit, and it worked. Yeah, so it finally worked where they had a position that seemed lined up with some of my background. And I always felt like the experience that I had working in industry with EDS and then HP was really beneficial to me in terms of just managing a business and running an organization. Mark Baker, the president here, has had senior positions in major corporations, CEOs, and those kind of roles. And so he was and is still looks for that kind of experience and that kind of mentality when you're running an organization. So I think that really helped me. And sure enough, that's a part of what we do here. We're stewards of the members' money and the members' priorities, and we take that pretty seriously. Sometimes people will make a mistake. They'll be like, I think I'm going to retire from my job and I'm ready to slow down a little bit. So I thought I would call AOPA. And we're like, dude, this isn't the place for you. If you want to slow down. This is not a slow down and semi-retire kind of a place,
Yeah.
It's not a Piper Cub. This is an F-15 organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bring that analogy back, Maddie. Nice job.
I'm trying. Hey,
Look
I gotta
at her
do
circle
something.
back. So much.
So what got you into the Air Safety Institute side of things?
Well, that's the opening that they had available. I had some background in safety, and that's really what brought me into ASI. Of course, I was very familiar with the work that ASI did. Most GA pilots are. The reach that we have now is our material will be accessed around 10 million times a year. So we're on podcasts, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. Our sort of mantra is wherever, whenever, however you consume information, we want to be there with aviation safety information. So we've been working really hard to modernize our message and the channels of how we deliver that message.
For those who are not familiar with the Air Safety Institute, most pilots are, but those who aren't, could you give us a little bit more background of the Air Safety Institute and what you guys are about?
Yeah. So the Air Safety Institute was developed by AOPA about 62, 63 years ago. It's a part of AOPA. Sometimes people confuse that. They think, it's a separate entity. No, it's actually a part of AOPA. It's just like a department within AOPA. And our focus is on improving general aviation safety. So our board of directors has long believed that when AOPA first started, it was all about access, affordability, and safety. And really, everything we do still pretty much revolves around those three things. We want to grow general aviation, we want to protect it and keep it safe. And so that's what the Air Safety Institute does. And our role inside AOPA is to focus on the safety aspect of general aviation so that we can help grow it and help keep more people safe while they're enjoying this great thing.
So you talked about the primary focus of the Air Safety Institute, and I can tell, I'm sure Jim as well, we have been definitely affected in a positive way by what the Air Safety Institute does. The content that you've done, the content that you guys just put out, whether it's a lot of the videos, I think are the most well known by a lot of the pilots, those videos that you guys put up on YouTube. I know you kind of briefly talked about what some of the services and the content that you guys have. What are some of your favorites, or you think the things that are most influential?
Yeah, Maddie, you mentioned video, and we made a move, maybe 5 years ago, might have been a little more than that, to move really hard into video, because what we noticed was that's how people enjoy consuming information. They like storytelling, and they like to watch the people involved in it and see the faces and see, airplanes and stuff. So we noticed that the consumption of our legacy material, like online quizzes and courses and sort of the static material that once you make it, it just sits there on the web for people to consume. We noticed that was declining at a rate 3 times faster than the population of the pilot population was dropping. So we couldn't really blame that on the drop in pilot population at the time. We've since reversed that curve, and pilot population is growing. So we thought no, there's some other reason. We are no longer in sync with how people want to consume information. So we made a really hard push on video. We hired 2 videographers, and we have a couple writers on scene. We have 6 CFIs in the ASI shop itself. So yeah, that's been a real successful push for us, is recognizing that's where the industry was going. And I'll tell you how you could learn this. I was teaching my son to fly. This was right before I came to AOPA. And the way I learned to fly was I got my glide book, and before every flight, I would read whatever it was, and then I would go fly. So I sit down with my son, and we're briefing up the flight, and I said, hey, tell me about the stall, or tell me about, whatever. And the glide book's right beside him, and I said, you can look in the book. So he pulls the book over, and he opens it, and I can hear the spine crack, which, as you know, is the sound you make when a book is first ever opened, right? And the funny thing was, Grant could talk about all the material that, every flight he was ready. He was prepped. He knew it. He could talk through the numbers. He could talk through the skill and how to do it. But what I learned from that was he wasn't getting it from a book. He was getting it from YouTube and from the other sources that he would find on the web. And that really made an impression on me. And sure enough, we've seen that just wholesale throughout our industry. That's how newer pilots are consuming information.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of industries right now, that it's just a generational thing, that it's such a visual society right now that they want to have that information in a video format, and especially now the shorter format. We had just talked, I don't know, last episode that we published was with Tyler Lauer, who was working with UND's Aerocast, and they went to this 3-minute Thursday approach of taking a hot button issue within their school program and seeing, all right, people are having problems with this part of steep turns, and really digesting that one larger issue into one small, easily to consume video of 3 minutes.
There's benefits to that in my mind. I really have never really been somebody that clings too much to the old ways we used to do things. Even when I was leading the Thunderbirds, it just drive me nuts when people would say, "Oh, this is tradition. This is how we've always done it." I'm like, let me tell you what tradition is. We fly with excellence safely. That's the only tradition I'm interested in. So too much, some of that's a good thing. It draws you back to your roots and your history, and some of that's good. But when it's used as a drag chute and it's holding you back because it prevents people from thinking more creatively or trying to solve very difficult problems because you just take the easy road, and it's tradition. It drives me nuts.
You kind of spoke just briefly about how ASI has kind of evolved over the years. Are there any other changes of note? And where do you see ASI going into the future with this in mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Maddie. So one of the changes we've made recently, and this is a shift in the whole paradigm for aviation. You guys have, and I certainly have, for the longest time we came up and we heard this sort of mantra of don't speculate, right? There would be an accident and people would start to talk about it, and they go, nope, don't speculate, just wait on the investigation. There's still some importance to that. But what's changed now and what's updated the industry is now we have insight to so much more data than they had, 20 or 30 years ago. We can see ADS-B tracks, and we often have video, and we have the communications recording. So what you can do now is you can analyze this accident and the potential causes of the accident without calling it, because you don't know enough to call it. You'll wait on the NTSB for that. But you can really help pilots understand what went on and help them, and we've done that with these videos we call early analysis. These are the potential elements of this accident, and whether or not they caused the accident, it can remind us to get fresh on that information. That's been a huge success for us. I was really worried about doing that in the beginning because I was worried about damaging the ASI brand and damaging AOPA. But it turns out people were really thirsty for that from a trusted source, and that's what we work really hard to try to do. So one of the new things we're doing, these early analysis videos, in fact, we're doing one right now, where we try to come out within days of an accident to help people understand it.
I think you touched on something I was just about to ask you too, with the early analysis of having it come from a trusted source, because I think that you've got a lot of people in the YouTube space of, I'm going to make my name in the aviation video space of, let's do an early analysis. And they're not always, I guess, up to par, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just caution people in anything you're doing, right, to be careful, do a little research on the people that you're listening to, right, the sources that you're allowing to influence you. Just do a little research on them and make sure that it's the source is credible in your mind. So
I think it's the part of speculation, and this is just my speculation on the speculation, is that, yeah, if you don't have all the facts, obviously don't make a determination. But even the NTSB has their preliminary report. It's, hey, could have been it. Like, this is what happened, and here's all the facts. And I think that's essentially what you're doing as well with those early analysis videos. Yeah, we don't have everything. There's not a final conclusion yet, but at least we're looking at the facts and not just speculating based on one thing.
Yeah, we try to do that, Maddie. We try to say, here's the facts that we know right now. And these facts could change, by the way, because sometimes you had bad data or sometimes you get more data. So our understanding of the facts could change. But regardless, based on these facts, here's the things that this accident brings up. And these are the places where the NTSB is likely going to go look. That's what we try to do. We try to be very careful not to say, make it the cause is known, or what we even think is the cause. We're just trying to help satisfy people's interest and their curiosity. And selfishly, in safety, your biggest issue is always reaching people, because a lot of people fall asleep halfway through the word safety. Yeah. So you can take their interest in this accident and you can pivot it to give them a safety message while they're satisfying their interest in this accident.
Absolutely. And I think if it was just what you guys did, just early analysis, you could say, oh, well, you're, just making speculations, but you also have your main videos, which are talking about the accidents in full and using all of that information. And that's poignant enough, but having the early analysis videos paired with those, I think, brings it and makes it very well-rounded and kind of takes the mystery out of what the NTSB is doing almost, because, you can read through a report, and if it's anything larger than a light twin, good luck. It's, 50 pages long and it's full of jargon that you may not be familiar with. I think you putting it not only just in video format, but in a digestible format for pilots and non-pilots alike is so important and really affects the safety aspect of GA very positively.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm really, really happy to hear you say that, because that's what the team works hard to do. And to your point, the accident case studies are the full-blown videos where the NTSB report has come out. And now we can lean into that a little harder with, this is what the NTSB said was the cause, and let's flesh out some more of these factors a little bit. And those are still the most popular videos we do. They're hard to do. They take a long time. You have to wait till the NTSB finishes, which can be up to 2 years. Yeah. They're getting better, but still can be up to 2 years. That's still the most popular thing that we do. Those are watched millions of times a year.
You can really tell the amount of time and effort that you guys put into those, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So I just want to commend you. I know you probably know you're doing a great job, but you, from a longtime listener and viewer, you guys are doing a great thing.
It's nice to hear, and I'll pass that on to the team. I joke all the time because I introduce people on the team and what they do. People say, well, what do you do? So, well, mostly I'll go around, travel around, and take credit for all the hard work that they do. That's what I do mostly. So thanks. I'll pass that on.
So are there any new initiatives that you guys are in the works? So you said you were on TikTok, which is very fun. Are there any other areas that you're looking at, stuff that's becoming more apparent that people are seeking interest in that you're wanting to explore with the Air Safety Institute?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. So the path that we would like to go down now is we have Rob Gefsky, who is our research arm, our research and analytics. I like to joke with Rob, you're the manager of our research and analytics department. He goes, I'm one guy. Yeah, you're the department. So, you got to manage yourself. But he's really good with data. And so what we're trying to do is move more into big data analytics. A while ago, we worked with UC Davis, and we're now working with MITRE. and we're trying to be able to mine some of the ASRS reports that come out. There's some 1,500 ASRS reports that are issued by GA pilots every month. But NASA doesn't have the funding to really dive through those reports to use them in a predictive manner. MITRE thinks they can help us do that. So we're trying to figure out, with all these reports we're ingesting, can we figure out some problems before they occur? Like, for example, if a pilot on a departure misses an altitude, flying out of San Jose, okay, a single pilot misses an altitude restriction, okay, pilot error. If 3 pilots miss that same altitude restriction in a month, okay, there's something about that procedure that is difficult for pilots. So if we could find that kind of data, and I know it's there, I know it's somehow in all those ASRS reports, and I think MITRE's going to help us be able to find that. So that's probably the biggest new initiative we have, is being able to do that kind of predictive analysis on where our next safety issue might occur.
I think that's fabulous. I'm trying to do more reports myself, just because it is something I know can be used for good. I remember I almost got in an accident one time. It was ATC error. They cleared us to cross the runway and tower cleared somebody to take off. Whoops. And my instructor told me, I was like, should I file something? He said, no, don't stir the pot. Really, these reports, I know they can be very valuable. And I think if more people knew that, we'd get a bigger stretch of data from that. I think when you guys start doing something like that, and if you make that public, like, hey, if there are these issues, you should report them, because it is actually being used. Because most people think, well, it's just a report. Oh, well, like, it'll cover me, but it's really not. If it wasn't a big deal, it wasn't a big deal. But I think it really could be a big deal before it becomes a safety issue big deal.
Yeah, Maddie, you're so right about that. It's not calling somebody out. It's not ratting somebody out. The reason why this system is run by NASA is so that it's away from the FAA and NASA can de-identify all the information. So by law, they cannot use those reports for enforcement action. They've never tried to. They be in the FAA. So all you're doing when you issue that report is helping the system. I'm such a big believer in those reports. Like, if you have any doubt in your mind, issue a report. It's not going to hurt you. It could potentially help you. A lot of people think it's a get out of jail free card, right? The ASRS reporting system. It can help, but it's not designed that way, right? It's really designed for helping us see problems in the system.
Sure.
Well,
I think that's fabulous.
I like what you guys are doing and taking this data and making it more of a proactive approach at looking at it. If that's successful, that could be a really great thing for aviation.
Yeah, we'll come back and do another one of these podcasts. If we are, it'll probably be, a year before we can figure out how to use these tools and what they might be able to tell us. But I'm excited about it. It's kind of like, what I've mentioned to people is that I don't know what this data is going to tell us, but I cannot imagine all this data is going to tell us nothing.
Right.
There's some gold in there. We've just got to go figure out how to mine it.
Absolutely. Well, that'll be exciting.
I love that.
Anything else you wanted to cover on Air Safety Institute? And then I'll let Maddie talk again.
Our podcast. Can I talk about our podcast real quick?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, please do. One
of the more popular items we have is a podcast. We run a podcast called There I Was. It's free on Apple or iTunes or Spotify, where you get your podcast. And we started this about maybe 5 years ago. We do one a month. And it's just pilots that come in, and I host it, and they tell us a story of a bind they got in and sort of how they got out of it. It's storytelling, again, same kind of concept, storytelling, pilots telling their own stories. And that podcast has been a really effective means for us. It's been downloaded more than 4 million times. So if you're a podcast listener, give us a listen, download it. Tell us what you think.
We know a couple of podcast listeners. We can maybe point them in your direction.
I thought you might.
We do. Just a few.
Well, Jim, is it time?
I think it is time. Do you want to take the reins on this, man?
Oh my God, I would love to. Mr. McSpadden, what is your aviation unpopular opinion?
My aviation unpopular opinion. My unpopular opinion is probably that I support the 1,500-hour requirement before going to 5-hit base.
Ooh.
I understand the people that say hours aren't everything. There's more to it. There's more quality in the training you need. I get that, and I agree with it. But I don't think it's either or. Let's put the quality in the 1,500 hours. We saw the Ethiopian accident where the max issue. That can get very controversial. But in spite of all that was going on, the pilot in the right seat had a total of 380 hours, total flying hours. And I just think there's value in being in a cockpit, even if it's a small airplane, where you're flying the airplane and dealing with issues that come up when you're flying, whatever you're flying. I think there's a lot of value in that experience. And so until I hear of a better way that we're going to make up for the experience you get in flying for 1,500 hours, I'm a fan of the 1,500 hour requirements. I don't know, but I support it because I don't see a better way.
That's a pretty spicy one.
That's a new one for us.
Mm-hmm. Nobody's dared touch it yet.
Yeah, right.
However, it makes sense because you do run the Air Safety Institute, so it is a definite safety consideration.
Yes.
There's value in experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sound like a knucklehead here in a second, but I think that there's certainly value in, like, every experience that you have, you're making a deposit into that bank of training, and when you need to make a withdrawal, you better hope you've got the experience to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true. There's that old saying, that says when you get into a crisis, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to your training. And I just believe that to be true.
Yep, absolutely.
I agree. Well, thanks for playing along. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know it's been a little bit of a fight, but it was really wonderful having you on.
Yeah, I'm glad we got it done. Yeah, let's do it again. Give us some time, see if we can get something out of this big data initiative that we got going on. If we do, I'd love to come back and share some of that with you.
Yeah, we would love to have you back for that.
Oh.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
course.
we'll look forward to trying to bring you back here in the future.
So thank you once again to Richard McSpadden for your kindness, for being on the podcast, and the lasting impact that you'll have on the aviation community for all the things that you contributed to it.